Hello, my creative friends, and welcome to the very first PM edition of Painting in Your PJs live with Minette. I am Dr. Minette Riordan. Yes, I'm in my brand new PJs that I got this summer when my daughter Maggie was home visiting, and I am super excited to have an evening edition of this show. We are well into just over 200 episodes of Painting in Your PJs live, mostly done in the early morning, which is my typical time when I am down here in my studio making art anyway. And I have a lot of you that mornings don't work, so I thought it would be fun to add an evening edition and mix things up a little bit. And I'm going to do more of a guided class than I normally do. So if you're brand new to painting in your PJs, welcome. I'm so excited that you're here. Be sure to subscribe to my channel so you get notified when I go live in the future or when I add any new content. And make sure if you like what we do tonight that you give me a thumbs up and hit that like button so we can let other people know what is happening here on Painting in Your PJs. So Painting in Your PJs is all about using art as creative process for personal growth, for self-development, for just deeper reflection, mindfulness, and creative play. So, what I want to share with you this evening is one of the gorgeous sacred circle designs designed by my son Connor. And that can't see it in the light that way, but you'll see it in just a second when I turn my camera down. And we're going to do a really creative practice that I learned from another Zentangle artist at a conference that I was at. We're actually going to be tangling with watercolor. And I'm going to share my screen and show you what that looks like here. So if you are brand new to Zentangle, let me know that in the comments. So if you're live on YouTube for the first time, hi Marion, thanks for being here. If you're live on YouTube for the first time, there is a chat feature where you can chat with me as we go through the process. Hi Misty, welcome. And Zentangle is a meditative form of drawing, normally practiced in black and white, very simple, but we're going to take that process into our watercolor. This is my messy sample that I was working on last night. So I'm going to hit record on my phone as well and just get a nice little time-lapse video going here. Hi, Mary. Oh my gosh, I love all those emojis. That is so much fun. So this design, I'm actually going to put a link to the design right here in the comments. Nope, that is the link to our membership. So let me go back and get the link to the design. Bear with me for 1 second. I'm going to drop that link right in the comments in case anybody wants to download this link right to our free design. So these designs are created by my son Connor Dobson, who's my partner in the Sacred Circles membership, and I'll tell you more about what that's all about a little later. But each of these original designs has a beautiful affirmation. Hi Kay, howdy do to you too. Thanks for being here. And I really love this design, and I particularly love this affirmation. At this moment, I have everything I need. Such a powerful reminder that right now, right here, we have everything that we need. So whether you're just working in your journal, whether you printed out the design, it doesn't matter. All you're going to need is some watercolor paints for this evening. We might need a Micron or other fine line. Hi, Amy. Welcome, welcome. Another fine line waterproof pen. Hello, Pearl Ann. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You're obviously Heidi. Hello, my friend. You're going to need some water, and you're going to want a couple of brushes. Let me dry this one off. And you're going to want one brush here that is just a little bit fatter for doing the background color. And then you're also going to want a really fine tip brush as well. So I printed my design out just on some mixed media paper. It's nothing fancy. My sample I printed on watercolor paper, but I don't think that it makes a whole lot of difference. But so this is where we're going. This is where we're starting. And then I also have just a piece of scratch paper to work on as well because we're going to practice the patterns. This is going to go in a couple of stages. We will not finish this project, but I want to just show you some ideas for getting going, or we would be here for hours and hours. And even though I'm in my PJs, I'm looking forward to having some relaxing time afterwards. And I did some practice in my journal, so I'm going to teach you a couple of Zentangle patterns that are really easy to use with the watercolor. And I just played in my journal. These are not fancy watercolor paints. They're nice paints, but they are definitely not fancy paints. And welcome everyone. So excited to have you joining me live. If you're just joining us, welcome. Delighted that you're here. And what we're going to start with, hola Blanca, welcome. What we're going to start with is we're going to get our background color on to the paper, and then we're going to set that aside to dry, and we're going to practice our tangle patterns, and then we're going to come back and add those patterns to our design. I did put the link to the design in the comments if you're wanting to download this design. But again, you could do this practice on pretty much any surface. You could even just do some swatches of color with watercolor and practice the designs over those. So I'm going to go ahead and spray my watercolors here. Just get them nice and activated. I'm not going to use all those colors, but I'm going to go ahead and do that anyway. And I picked a palette that I like, but feel free to use any color palette that you choose. And when I was playing and practicing last night, I decided that I think I like the blue better than the green that's on the background. So I'm going to go with the same palette in the center, but add blue. We don't need these colors to be super opaque, because we are going to go back and add pattern over the top. So I think this is a size 6 brush, and I'm not even going to be super precious with the watercolor. Now remember that watercolor, and I'm working wet on dry. So my paper is dry. I did not spray my page first because I want to control where that color is going. So I'm working with wet watercolor paint on the dry page. I've also tried this particular technique with Derwent Inktense, and it works just as well and is a lot of fun to do it with the Derwent Inktense. And so I'm just sort of mindfully taking my time to get some watercolor down on the page. I'm okay if those colors blend together a little bit. My yellow is still wet there, so you know that wherever two places of wet watercolor touch, they are going to spread and mix and mingle together, which sometimes creates happy results and sometimes might create results you're not that happy with. But I'm using quite a bit of water, but not too much water. So I don't want that color to be super opaque, but I also don't want that color. Okay, my purple got mixed in with my orange there, so that is almost a little bit brown. And I also, I want this to dry pretty quickly, so I'm being mindful of how much water I am adding with my watercolor. Hi Leslie, welcome. Glad you're here, my friend. So I'm starting with just putting a nice watercolor background. I'm going to fill in the whole background. I'm going to set this aside to dry. We're going to practice tangling with watercolor. And as always with the Zentangle practice, I am turning my page to make it easier on my hand to reach. And I didn't start with a moment of sort of mindful calm, which I normally would because I got a little bit excited about being here in the evening. And can I just say I had a cup of coffee about 1:30, and so I'm a little perky at the moment. Got a lot of coffee in me today. And I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited about my new pajamas. Just saying, they are very comfy and silky. I met this amazing woman. I was leading a retreat in Costa Rica in December of 2019, and one of the speakers at that retreat was this lovely Canadian woman who was an amazing speaker. And she was wearing this beautiful sort of pantsuit with the matching top and bottoms. And she says, well, actually, they're just silk pajamas. She said, since I retired, because she had retired from a corporate job in the technology industry and decided she just wanted to wear pajamas. So she went out and bought a lot of beautiful pairs of silk pajamas and wore them as her daytime wear. And I thought that is just absolutely brilliant. Why don't I do that more often? You didn't know she was wearing pajamas. The patterns were beautiful, but she was a great speaker and she was also very funny. And she decided that after all the years of suits and heels that she was just going to be comfortable. Now, having always been an entrepreneur and always worked for myself and mostly worked from home, or I had my own office when I had a publishing company, I never had to dress up for anyone else other than myself. So notice I'm going to the blue on the background. Hi, Yvonne. Welcome, welcome. I'm going to the blue on the background instead of this center color here because when I add this purple, I don't want it to bleed into the orange. So I'm giving that orange just a minute to dry. I'm painting my outer circle first, and I'm very loosely painting this because, again, I am going to be adding more layers of watercolor over the top of this. And the thing I love about watercolor, it's going to dry, right? Lighter than we're putting that paint on, which is going to allow us to create this fun effect of tangling with watercolor. And as I mentioned, this is one of the designs from our Sacred Circle membership. Sacred Circles is a monthly membership focused on mindful coloring, Zentangle, and it's really about learning to slow down and fall in love with the creative process itself, not the destination. It's really about the journey. And what do we learn about ourselves on the journey? And how can we connect other mindfulness tools like breath and affirmations to our creative practice so that it becomes an integration of our mindfulness and our creative practices. And I am definitely someone who very much appreciates a more active approach to meditation. And grab a rag here, a more active approach to meditation than sitting meditation. And for me, any kind of art can really be that mindful form of meditation for me personally. All right, so now I'm going to go back and get the purple down in the center, and this should be dry enough. So this one still looks a little wet, so I'm going to start up here and I'm going to go in with this pretty violet. So I printed out my sample on 130-pound watercolor paper. This is just plain old Canson mixed media paper, and I'm noticing that the paper is definitely buckling a little bit. So if you're working on mixed media or cardstock. It might be buckling a little bit. Don't worry about it. Eventually it will settle down on its own, or when you're complete with the project, stick it under a stack of books. If you're like me, you have a lot of books, you could stack things underneath and it will flatten itself out. I also did not tape this. I know a lot of people, when they're working with watercolor, like to tape their paper to the surface of what they're working on. And because I am tangling this evening, I want to be able to move my paper around. I don't want to be limited by needing to tape it down. I love, Yvonne, that you have a favorite pair of PJs. Currently, it's lemon cool, culotte type pant and tank top, which makes sense because it's probably still nice and toasty warm where you live. It's very chilly down in my basement, so I would consider these jammies that I got to definitely be a fall pair. Not quite warm enough for winter, a little too hot for summer, but by the end of the day, I am chilly after being down here in my basement with the air conditioner on. All right, so I'm loving this color palette so far. I did like the green as well. So whatever color palette you're working with is purple. So probably not that exciting to just watch me be adding watercolor paint at the moment, but we're going to get to the fun stuff. We got to do the background layering in of those foundations first so we can get to the fun stuff and let this dry. My husband always laughs at me because if I, come home from doing something or we go for a walk in the evening and come home and take a quick shower, which I did before this call because I got my hair cut today and I felt like I had little hair slivers on my neck and I was itchy. Probably more information that you wanted to know, but I love getting into my PJs after a day at work and just being comfy and cozy. All right. And I've left my edges here white and these here white. I may go ahead and add a pop of green back in there in a little bit, but for right now I need this to get really dry. And I also have a white gel pen on hand for adding some highlights. So I have my watercolors, a white gel pen, a black Micron, or other permanent fine tipped pen for adding some detail at the end. And colored pencils are another great way. I love combining colored pencils and watercolor. You can get some amazing shading that's happening. I was up early this morning and am having a ton of fun working on designs for my Tree of Life retreat that's coming up at the end of October, which is an in-person retreat here at the end of October. And this old brush, this is an old brush that my mom gave me, and the wood is chipping, and so I'm getting these little wood bits in there, but I think we're just going to let them stay. Okay, so now I have the bulk of the watercolor down. I'm going to set this aside to dry. I am going to grab a piece of just practice paper and that fine tip paintbrush. There it is. So this, as you can see, is a very fine tip. This is an inexpensive Princeton brand that I found at Office Depot that came in a lot of different sizes and shapes, but it's pretty nice. So a round brush with a really fine tip is what you're going to need for the next stage. And as I'm moving paper around, I'm going to make sure I just still have that lined up there in my other camera. And I'm going to start with a pattern called Dance. And I'm going to tangle with watercolor. So this is the fun part and what we're going to do when we get over to the page. So pick a color, any color. I love this dark blue, so I'm going to start with this dark blue. And Dansk is a beautiful, and I'm going to go ahead and go over the top of this watercolor, but you don't need to do that. I was just testing watercolor on the mixed media paper, but it's there, so I might as well use it. So Dance is a straight line with a little seed pod on the top, and let me sort of zoom in on that, which looks like the tangle pattern fescue. Looks like the tangle pattern fescue. And I'm noticing that I have too much water on my brush. And what I did not grab was paper towels, but I got some rags here. So you're going to want to control how much water is on your brush for this process. And then I'm going to come around and I'm going to put an aura. And if you're unfamiliar with Zentangle, an aura simply means I'm echoing that original line there. And that one was a little, that fescue got a little bit messy there because I had too much water on my brush. And I'm just paralleling that line. So one of the things, especially, I know I've got some of my fellow CZTs on here, is that if you are an avid tangler, this is a practice about really letting go of control. So you do not have nearly the control with this that you have with a pen. So Dansk again is that fescue, making sure I don't have too much water on that brush. We're going to put a couple of auras around there, and then I can add another one of those coming out a different direction. And they're really beautiful. They can be layered up. You can have quite a few auras going around and around that sort of central little seed pod. I can also vary. I'm a lefty, so it's natural for me to draw that pod tilting to the left, but if you're a righty, then you might find yourself wanting to tilt it to the right. And it's also fun to vary the direction of them. And I just kind of love the way it looks with the watercolor because it is so imperfect. So there's our first pattern. It is very similar to Dude, which I also love and we used in our Sacred Circles class the other night, and would be another fun one. So that's the pattern that I used here was Dansk with the fescue with the auras around it. The next pattern is a classic Zentangle pattern from headquarters called Diva Dance, sometimes also called Waltz, and it is a great one for this practice and this process as well. And so I'm just going to start. We may vary this when we get to our pattern with a long wavy line. Yep, I said that earlier, Kayla. Hi, glad that you're here, that this is a fun process to do with the ink tents for sure. I have done it with the ink tents. It's a little bit trickier with the ink tents, but I think in one of the Sacred Circle classes I did a demo of doing this with the ink tents. And so we're going to do that same aura process. Again, I'm just being mindful of how much water is on my brush. I added 2 auras, and then I'm going to come in with some more of those little crescent moons. And I went ahead and added one to the bottom of that line as well. And sometimes we might want those crescent moons to be a little more elongated. And so that's our very simple diva dance pattern. And it can go in a variety of different directions. And you'll see so I had some fun here with a longer diva dance in this direction and a shorter one in this direction. So again, last night I had fun sitting in front of the TV trying a variety of different patterns. Perk is one of my favorite Zentangle patterns. Thank you. It definitely takes some practice. It's why we're practicing on paper with that brush, just practicing that line control. And the more that we take time to practice, that we pay attention to how much pigment we have on our brush, the better the result will be. So it's definitely worth practicing. So we're going to come in here and do some perk. And perk is this one here that we're going to do inside of these long petal shapes. And so perk is a series of curved parallel lines. So I'm going to do a series of 3 parallel lines. And this is a great pattern for fitting into all kinds of spaces. And it works really well in ovals, egg shapes, long rounded spaces. And inside this, I'm going to start in this middle one here, and I'm going to draw kind of an elongated orb. And I'm going to draw another one below it and one above it. And Leslie, I was playing with my Tree of Life design, and we're going to use this same tangled process on our Tree of Life designs in October. And some of the patterns make the most beautiful bark patterns. And then I very carefully just darkened in around those orbs a little bit to fill in that white space. And I'm kind of drawing those orbs like they're sort of nestled behind. I love this one. It always, to me, looks like some kind of crazy seed pod. If I wanted to, I could finish that off up there with a little bit of design, but that's our perk. It's a really fun pattern and has a lot of flexibility and different ways that we can use it. And then we're going to do some crescent moon. Crescent moon is one of the very first Zentangle patterns that people learn, and it is also a great one for this practice. It uses the same process of our diva dance and our dance. I'm just going to make some little ladybug shapes. Not too close together, not too tiny. And then we're going to do that same process of oring, adding those aura lines. Just taking our time, remembering to breathe. And just like when we're drawing, we have to remember to not hold our paintbrush too tight. So you'll actually get much better line when you kind of loosen your grip on your paintbrush a little bit. And then I'm going to come in and aura around that entire shape. So we might use some crescent moon in our design as well. And the last one is Bunzo, which is a really fun pattern for filling in spaces and creating a little bit of drama in our artwork, because it also has a lot of black in it. Let's see, let's come in with this nice pink shape. The other thing I like about this practice is the effect of color on color tangling. Normally we create a lot of contrast with black and white, but this is color on color. So if you're working with the Zentangle over the top of the watercolor, you want it to be really dry, because otherwise what will happen is that you will lose the lines and they will just disappear into the wet page. Kayla, it's a great question, but certainly dry to the touch. It's not like it needs to sit for hours by any means, but let it be dry to the touch. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to go back to mine in just a minute, and you'll see that it's going to be dry enough. So Bunzo is kind of starts with this pretty little petal or teardrop shape. And then I'm going to add another one of those, and I'm going to thicken that line. So we're again using that same practice of adding those aura lines. But this time I'm going to add line weight and thicken those lines, which is going to give it a really nice look. And then we're going to imagine that this is blooming. And we're going to add a few more. So I'm going to get some of that water off the tip of my brush. And I'm just going to let those little shapes bloom off of each other. And in the centers where they touch, some of that watercolor is just going to combine, which is going to create some interesting darkening in some of the lines some places, which is going to be really beautiful. This is one of the things I love about watercolor, is how it blends and reacts with itself on the page. So there's our sweet Bunzo pattern. So we could just keep going with this one as much as we wanted to, and it could grow to fill a whole page, but I love that. And sometimes I recommend, just giving yourself a minute to just play with your brush, because I found myself last night just having some fun with dashes, with straight lines, with wavy lines, letting the brush do some of the work. When we pick up that brush and put it back down, we can create some interesting magic in our lines. So giving yourself permission to just play with color. This brush is not great for making dots. It's almost too pointy, so I'd probably have to come in and work a little bit harder, but just giving yourself some permission to play with some of those dots. So those are the patterns that we're going to be using in our design. So I am going to switch back to my other design here, make sure I'm getting that lined up in both my cameras. Well, that didn't quite work because it got off the screen. Okay, we're going to go this way. And I'm going to work on one side of the design, not the whole design, so that I can show you what it kind of looks like all together. Is what we do in our Sacred Circles Zentangle classes as well, is that I usually show a portion of a pattern and then give people the opportunity to finish it on their own. So my goal is to keep this episode to about an hour, and we'll just see if we get it done in an hour. I want to show you all of the patterns on the sacred circle, so then you can go off and have a lot of fun playing on your own. So I'm going to start with my perk. I was going to start in the center, but I don't know why I decided to go for that orange. So we're just going to go with our perk. So I'm going to work on the inside of this petal shape here. Little too much water on there. I'm going to create those parallel lines. I'm going to create 3 sets of those lines. And I'm going to give that just a second to dry. So I'm going to go ahead and go around my circle, turning my page as I go. And what I'm noticing is that second or third line is perfect. That first one still has a little too much water in it. So just being mindful of the quantity of water. That one's better. Doing those 3 sets of parallel lines. They'd even be fun just with stripes this way. And they're kind of like little upside down C's, or because I'm drawing sort of top to bottom of the design, it's kind of a backward C, so they are slightly rounded lines. And I'm not being too precious with it flowing over into that little channel outside the line. It's totally fine. Again, being mindful of how much water I'm using. And as soon as I get into this detailed part, I'm relaxing, I'm feeling more focused, just enjoying being here in the moment, putting color on paper. And your questions are welcome. So Kayla's had great questions. If anyone else has questions, feel free to pop your questions in the chat. And so I'm going to put 3 of these elongated ovals inside of each of these spaces. Again, I'm tucking those ovals. This one's just going to get 1, I think, up here at the top. So I'm drawing 1 central oval and then sort of tucking the other ones behind. Again, turning the page as needed. In order to make it easy for your hand. And if you haven't watched any of my videos for this past August, I'm working on creating my own Oracle deck. This will be the second deck I created. I have one that I created for my business coaching. Well, I first created it as a gift for my mom, probably a decade ago, and have been wanting to create a new one for a while and decided to take up the challenge of painting faces. And so me and the morning crew have been having fun painting faces throughout the month of August. And I had a insight this morning. I was looking at the cover of a magazine, and it has this gorgeous graphic illustration on the cover of it, but the face is in profile. And I realized in my deck so far that all of my faces are looking straight ahead or maybe a little up or down. And so tomorrow morning, bright and early at 7 a.m. Mountain Time, I'm going to be practicing drawing faces in profile. So drawing faces is hard no matter what. It's certainly very challenging for me personally. I'm just on some plain mixed media paper. Last night I did print on a piece of 130-pound watercolor paper, but this is just plain old Canson mixed media paper, which goes through my printer just fine. I don't even think it may be the same weight as the cardstock we use, but the cardstock doesn't take the watercolor as nicely. So this is just from it's a 9 by 12 piece of watercolor paper from just a plain old Canson mixed media pad. One of the great ones to get on sale at Michael's when they have buy one, get one free or buy one, get one half off. I can tell you this is probably a 98 pound. Yeah, so this is a 98-pound mixed media paper, which is working great. It's not buckling too much. It's buckling a little bit, but as it dried, it seemed to just dry fine. And this is the part that just really takes some patience. And be kind to yourself. Remember the thing that's always trickiest about watercolor is that it has a mind of its own, right? And it is a perfectly imperfect media to work with. And I think the more that you let it be imperfect, the more you learn to enjoy the process. So there are definitely people who are experts at painting with watercolor and excel at detail and tiny line work, and takes a lot of practice to get there. What I've learned to really love about watercolor is the way that it flows and the sort of happy accidents that happen. I'm also going to use that orange just to come in and add some color to our little seed pods here in the center of the design. And then I'm going to do the center of the petals. And I'm going to use a little this sort of yellow ochre because the yellow on yellow didn't have as much oomph as I wanted it to. And I think what I'm going to do in the center of these is just do some simple, just give them a little bit of texture in the center here. It'll go a little bit quicker. So I'm just using straight lines. My brush is pretty wet so that pigment is going on a little more opaque, which is what I want. And then I'm going to come up and just put a little orb at the top of each of those lines. And I love mixing Zentangle patterns with other forms of mark making, So maybe I'll come in and add a little just striping around the edge of this. And once this is completely dry, I will come in with my Micron, probably a PN or an O5, and really bring the black lines back because I like the drama of how that looks. So there we have our center of our piece done. And I'm going to do one section of the purple, and then I want to start working a little bit on my blue so you have some ideas for where to go with the rest of it. And I also want to show you how I would come in with either some black or some white and add a little bit of detail to the tangle patterns to create, a little more of that fine line Zentangle look that I know that I love. All right, so coming back to my purple over here, and we're going to do that beautiful dance pattern. I'm getting a lot of pigment, but I'm really blending in that water so it's not drippy either. And I'm going to come up and draw that straight line. Well, it's kind of curved with that little bit of fescue. And I'm painting away from me for this pattern. Some of the patterns I paint towards me. Hey, Tori, it's halftime at your grandson's soccer game. Thank you, my friend. Great to have you here. So I'm going to do 3 of these fescues up here. So in the Sacred Circles membership, we have 3 live calls a month, 2 in the afternoon and 1 in the morning here in the US time. One of those is a mindful coloring class, one is a tools class, and one is a Zentangle class. And this month, it's funny that Kayla mentioned the ink tents because we are going to be exploring ink tents with our sacred circles in our second class of the month. So remember with that dance, I'm getting those seed pods in there, and then I'm just going to come in and I'm going to fill the whole space with auras around those seed pods. Remember to turn your page as needed to make it a little bit easier to draw. So this is one, this pattern out of all of them is the one where you have to really be mindful of how much water you have on your brush. And also I'm very, very lightly touching the page with the tip of my brush. If I put too much pressure on my brush like I did here, I get those thicker lines. And see, I did it there too, a little too much water. So I want to be very mindful of how I'm holding the brush so that I get those really lovely fine lines. And again, this is practice, not perfection. How's everybody doing? Are you guys having fun? Does anybody have any questions? If you joined somewhere in the middle, welcome. So glad you're here. Love for you to do me a favor if you're liking what I'm doing and hit that like button up there so we can encourage other people to come along and watch these videos. I would love to get to 1,000 subscribers this year. So there's our pretty dance pattern. I love this pattern. I love the way that it looks. And so now I want to start working in the blue area up here. And for some of these, I'm going to do our bunzo. And for some, I'm going to do diva dance. And I may even play with just some of the line work here. But I know I'm going to use these 2 patterns and maybe some crescent moon. So you get to decide how busy you want the pattern to be. Yeah, smaller is definitely challenging. If you're trying to work too small, that can definitely be a challenge. Oh, look, there's a little iguana here coming along to say a little sticker floating around on my page there. And I'm going to show you guys so what we've been doing in the mornings in case you want to go back and watch any of the replays. So these are some of the faces. These are some that are in progress. So these are all faces that I'm working on or have painted in the morning series throughout the month of August. And I've been having so much fun painting all these different types of faces and really kind of finding my voice and style of creating faces. So there's a whole playlist from August of how to create your own oracle deck as well. It is very challenging, Blanca. It definitely just takes some practice. And that's where I think it's just awesome to, just get some paper or turn to a blank page in your journal and just practice. I mean, look how messy some of these lines are. But even if they look messy in the moment, this is just like Zentangle with a black and white pen, that by the time that you're done, no matter how messy those individual lines are, the whole of the design ends up being really, really beautiful. And again, I'm working color on color, which creates, just a really lovely look and design. And I'm keeping my paint really close because it helps me from not just dripping all over everything. And I want to come in here and I'm going to start kind of in the middle of this space, and depending on what direction you're holding your particular design. You may see a different space, but I'm going to come in with that diva dance and just kind of let it fill the space, allowing those imperfections to go where they want to go. You can see when that brush is freshly loaded versus when it has less paint. And I like the variability of it. So I'm not making every one of my lines look the same like I would if I were drawing with the Micron. And we'll just see what we can create kind of on this other side here. Just kind of letting some of those lines flow, and I'm just going to kind of make it up, right? You just got to kind of wing it when you get into some of these awkward spaces. While I love the design that Connor created, this sort of random pattern is definitely a little bit challenging there. And I think I want to come in beside this one with some of that crescent moon. I think it'll look nice alongside of this one. Even when I was just coloring this design with colored pencils, these random patterns were a little bit tricky to find some symmetry. So most of the time our designs in the Sacred Circle memberships are definitely symmetrical, but Connor got a little wild with this one, which is fine. I'm up for the challenge. And so again, just taking my time. So the things that matter are that light touch, deciding if it's easier to draw towards you or away from you, the amount of water that you're using on the brush, and making sure you have a fine enough brush. So the fine tip on the brush is the thing that is going to have the biggest impact. And in the past, I would buy sets of acrylic or watercolor brushes, and they would come with all these little tiny brushes, and I'm like, I don't even know what to do with all these little tiny brushes. Well, now I know what to do with all these little tiny brushes. Save them for things like this. And then I'll pick in this space over here, just working on that same side, I'll come in and add some of our bunzo to the background, and then we'll talk about adding some black and some white to our design to round out our first PM edition of Painting in Your PJs live with Minette. All right, definitely liking the blue better than I like the green. And I'm just sort of turning this around, trying to decide where do I want my bunzo to start. And it's kind of nice if it starts in a bit of a corner and sort of flows to the outside there. So it flows to the outside there. So I am completely off my other camera, but that's okay. So I'm going to just come in and maybe just ink that up. I have way too much water on my brush, so I'm going to just dab that a little bit. I'm going to come in with that kind of petal shape, that aura around the petal shape. Nice big fat one. I'm going to add some line weight. So these kind of look a little bit like seashell shapes too. And I'm noticing, because this is a cheap brush, that I'm getting some of those little frayed edges on it. So I'm just going to run that in the water again to bring all of my bristles back together so that I don't get draggy lines, because otherwise my lines will start to create their own auras. Again, watercolor does its thing, but there's, some of those things we have a little bit more control over. Okay, I'm trying to go too fast. So the other secret of this is just slow down. Okay, that one has a lot of water in it. Hold that brush lightly. Remember to breathe. If you notice your hands getting tired, stop and stretch your hand. And my Sacred Circles practice is generally my evening creative playtime. So because I can tangle or color sitting in front of the television at night, I cannot paint. Sometimes I'll have watercolor up there, but for the most part, I'm looking for kind of those non-messy things to do. So there we have examples of all of our patterns added. We have our perk, we have our dance, we have some bunzo, some diva dance, and a little bit of crescent moon added on there. And when you want to add gel pen or Micron to your design, you want to make sure that your surface, me too, so fun, Kayla. Um, it was challenging at first, but I definitely fell in love with the practice. But you want to make sure your surface is super, super dry before you start to add any detail. So one place I might add some detail and some definition, let me zoom that back in again, is here in the center of these. They got a little amorphous, so maybe I'm going to come in and just bring a little extra definition, just sort of following the design that's there. Adding those little orbs, also adding a little petal shape there to the center. And I'm dragging my hand through the wet paint. Don't do that. It's always probably good to let this dry for a while before you come back in to add some of those final details. And I'm also feeling like I want to bring some of the original elements of Connor's line work back to the surface, and I may do this in a variety of places. So I'm using a Micron 03, so it's not a super fine tip. And this also allows me to see where, so I have these, channels on the sides of the petals that maybe could get a little more pattern added to them. There's always just something satisfying about adding those outlines. So on Perk, I have a couple of options. So I'm going to go ahead and outline the petals. And I want that perk to pop out a little bit. So I could do that with colored pencil would be a fun way to add some shading. Derwent ink tints would be a fun way to add some shading. And I just happen to, I don't know if this is a water soluble one or not, but I could come in, it just happened to be sitting on my table, and just add a little drama with, again, I'm staying with that theme of color on color, right? I'm staying with the theme of color on color. But then I want to come in with my gel pen, and you can see the difference just that little bit of darkening adds. But I'm going to come in with my gel pen on each of those orbs, just on one side of the orb. Some of my orbs have kind of disappeared, and add a little bit of white gel pen and just create a little bit of rounding on my orbs. And just those little bitty touches can have a big impact on the ultimate finishing of our design. So there's a little more white without the dark being added, so it creates a little bit different effect. I actually like it with the dark. I could also come in with another warm color like some yellow and add some yellow to those seed pods. So I find that I have more fun when I really get to mixing my media, right? To mixing my media. I definitely like the black outlines, but on my dance here, I think I want to bring back that fescue. So I'm just going to go over, and some of that white is going to disappear because almost every gel pen, I tested Posca pens before the call, everything will pick up a little bit of that color underneath. But again, we can add just a little bit more interest by adding some of that white. I could even come in and make my little seeds in the center, just some little dots of white just helps really create an effect. So just some fun ways to add a little bit of variety. And then what I love about this dark blue is we have a lot of opportunity over here to come in crescent moon. I can create another aura with that white, and I'm noticing that my white has a little bit of orange in the ink where it picked up the pigment from the paint, but I can come in, I can make dots all day long, and where I have some of those thicker lines, I can come in with some dots. This is a great one to come in and add some of those dots to. And I don't have to add them to all of them, but because I love dots, I can get carried away. But when we're working color on color like this, instead of creating contrast with shading like we normally do in Zentangle, we're focused on highlights, right? We're really focused on adding those highlights. You could 100% shade this with graphite, just like you would if you were doing traditional Zentangle. See if I have a pencil here. So perk is a really fun one to shade with just about anything, but I could also just come in with some graphite. And simple add some shading. I actually like the graphite better than the orange shading on shading. So a variety of different ways to come in and just have some fun trying a new technique and a new way of working on some Zentangle. So let me zoom that back out so we can kind of see, so you can kind of get a taste of the impact of the whole thing and where it's going to go. I'm going to have some fun finishing this one up. It's going to definitely be a little neater than the original one that we started with. And you can see I was testing different patterns to see what I liked, but I really liked the dance. And it's fun to just experiment and try and to see what you can get to. So thank you so much for joining me for the first ever Painting in Your PJs PM edition. Super fun to gather live with you. If you're watching the replay, thank you so much for watching and playing along. Please take a minute to hit the like button on this video. Let people know that you enjoyed it and that it is a video worth watching. So I will be here most Wednesdays. I never say every Wednesday. I do have some travel coming up at the end of the month, but I will be here most Wednesdays. Can't tell you what we're going to do next Wednesday, but I will be here with my PJs and something fun to create. Hi, Heather. Great to see you. Glad you still have power. You guys are so welcome. Thank you, Blanca, Leslie, Amy. So appreciate you guys. Absolute pleasure, as always, to be here. Thanks, Heidi. I'm so glad my workshop changed your life. Heidi came to my last Wild Creative Abandon in person. And beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much, Heidi. Great to see you guys all. I will see you for Painting in Your PJs morning edition tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Mountain Time. Have a lovely rest of your evening. Rest well. Don't stay up too late working. Good night, everybody. I'll see y'all soon. Bye-bye.